There we go. Well, we are recording. Yeah, it always gives me two options: record to this computer or record to the cloud. And I always hit computer. I guess I just hit cloud by accident. Not important, not interesting. Thursday, December 15th, 2022, 4:15 p.m. Eastern time with Dr. Aaron Williams, the wizard of 222 nanometer light. He is a warlock of the highest order. He practices dark magic. Well, not dark magic. He practices blue magic. And I think the last time we chatted, was it the last time? You mentioned a book called The Crowd by Gustave Le Bon. And I actually went and got it on Audible and listened to it. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I had, so like when I first heard Dr. Malone mention mass formation psychosis on Joe Rogan's show about a year ago, I thought that Matthias Desmet was like some old, like Sigmund Freud figure. And then I ended up having him on my show because I realized he's like 15 years older than me. I was like, oh, I just figured this was a guy that's been dead for a century. And I was like, oh, no, there's his email. All right. So when you mentioned the book, I was like, I had just, I guess, incorrectly assumed Gustave Le Bon is just like a, I searched for his Twitter and then I realized, oh, wait, he died in 1931. But so I was correct how I should have been acting. But what's interesting is, when I first found out, well, I don't think I checked his death date. I checked his birth and I was like, oh, this guy's born during like the Civil War. Like, okay. But what I hadn't realized until I think towards the end of the book was that he wrote the book. There's several versions. I don't know which version I read, but I assumed that he had written it after World War II. And it's so eerie reading it and knowing that it was the final edition, the final most revised. It couldn't have been past 1931 because that's when he died. 2 years before Hitler came to power. But the entire time you're reading it, it just sounds like a book that was written immediately after World War II because he's describing to a T Hitler and sort of mass formation, just kind of the psychosis of crowds, the easily, offer the Hegelian dialectic, be the savior. And then you finish it and realize like, oh no, he's using examples like the Titanic because that was the most recent thing. And then you realize, oh, this was all before Hitler. And to a T, it's what happens with Hitler, which I think kind of, that's a really bad I told you so. But I guess it proves his theory's right. Like he died 2 years later. Hitler. I hope Hitler didn't read that book. I was like, oh fuck yeah, check out this blueprint. But I realize I haven't let you say a word yet. Dr. Williams, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. No, I'm enjoying hearing your thoughts on it because those are great thoughts, and how this stuff plays out is pretty incredible. I mean, we spend so much time in our, in our different distractions and what have you. But when you actually spend time getting into this stuff, not only do you learn a lot about, what's going on around you, what's gone on in the past, but it's actually quite fascinating. And those points you brought up are great. And looking at how, one of the good things to talk about today will be looking at how are these people prescient? Is it people who, are looking out there and then someone does pick up their ideas and run with them? What is, how did this kind of transpire in history? That'll be something, the chicken or the egg sort of debate will be something interesting to delve into. And as you were talking about the different distribution or publication, I guess, dates, it looks like the original one was in 1895.
Okay. Yeah. So before World War I, even.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm incorrect, but World War I doesn't seem like there was I don't know. I don't know enough about World War I. I guess it doesn't have such like an overarching figure as a Hitler, where you really incorrectly, there's obviously a million things that led to World War II. But I mean, for the most part, it does kind of seem like we can pick Hitler as this like point of new, like this domino that set it off, right? Maybe World War II would have happened anyway. A lot of historians argue World War II is just a continuation of World War I, and there was a brief ceasefire for 20 years, or 25, whatever. Yeah, 20 years. But yeah, he kind of. But what's interesting is seeing these ideas not just be published before the rise of Hitler, but seeing them play out in really the last 3 years of our own lives, and it today being December 15th, 2022, really seeing kind of just the COVID era, the I guess the insanity. I mean, he kind of describes like the psychology of it, but I really think it's the insanity of crowds. Is It's insane how accurate it is, and not just because it's vague. It's not that at all. It's not like he makes vague claims, then you can apply it to anything, like evil exists. Like, see, he was right. No shit. But like the idea of like offering solutions of people seeing things that didn't exist and everyone confirming each other's own reality of kind of the momentous, what word am I looking for? Conclusions that crowds can reach, and they can very quickly spiral out of control. I mean, you can go from you can't spread misinformation to we need camps for the unvaccinated. Like, there is some weird, I don't know, it's like those equations that you use in physics, like PV equals nRT. And like you can raise one value on one side and then obviously it has to drop on the other, or what, the overall figure is the same. And you can just, it's like as a group grows from one person to three people to 30,000 people, it's almost like the complexity of its group consciousness has to decrease. It's like you can take an individual like a Dr. Aaron Williams or Tommy Carrigan, and like we have our traits, we have our, things people hate about us, things people love about us, our senses of humor, our knacks or whatever. And then as like the thing grows into thousands of people, it almost reverts into sort of a primitive, it doesn't have like a favorite song or a nuanced take on like a political event, but it does sort of just become like a silverback gorilla. And it's just like kill the enemy, take the women, eat the food. It's sort of just, it dumbs down. It's like you have to spread an IQ out over. It's like you have to spread out one person's IQ over a group of 30,000 people. It kind of just almost becomes an amoeba. There's no introspection. It just lashes out. Are you agreeing with anything I'm saying, or am I just talking out of my ass here?
No, I agree with you for sure. It's the psychology is just really, really fascinating. And at this time, living through what we're living through right now, it's very frustrating as well, especially when you kind of see it, at least to a degree, at least that's what we're perceiving, is that we see what the truth looks like. And, being the only sober person at the drunk party, essentially, which gets frustrating over time, but it's better to know than not to know and just be frustrated, fearful, and, and upset. And, one of the things you were hitting on in terms of, it played out then, it played out now. Well, I don't know that much about World War One. I'm learning some more about it over time, but these are patterns that have been well worn, but it's just been unbeknownst to us. So whether it's in the medical field and you talk about, the different, say they shade the medical studies a little bit, or pharma kind of puts their elbow into the FDA, or you have conflict of interest back and forth, we know generally to look out for that when we're like evaluating a singular study. But then we forget about it when it's the Pfizer study, coming out at the beginning of this being 95% effective. What does that mean? It means, well, you had a less than a 0.01% decrease in your chances of getting it if you take our shot. So we should give it to everyone, including pregnant women and children. Then we kind of forgot because of the fear and the mass formation. I think that's another layer to this in terms of the psychological components that go into it, by design or by not. And I might have to get my dog here for a second. I might have to get her.
You're fine.
Hey, pausing the show. Hey, you're okay. Okay. So, hey, you're okay.
You're okay.
But the other thing you mentioned too, now in the non-barking portion of the show, the program, is you mentioned how people's perceptions of things and how it gets dumbed down to just one thing. We want to just jump to a conclusion. I think we're trained to do that with those false dichotomies you and I have talked about before, whether it's Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, God or science, or that sort of thing, or religion or science. We tend to do that for whatever and all the reasons. And Walter Lippmann was apparently a really notable guy in terms of history and also in terms of journalism. And so he was writing some books a little bit later, and this is circa 19 teens, 1920s. And one of them, might have it nearby. Let's see if I've got it hanging. Not at the moment, but I believe it was Public Opinion. Just straight public opinion, not crystallizing it like Edward Bernays talked about doing, crystallizing the public opinion. But one of the things he talked about, which I thought was brilliant, he said, okay, so you've got the people here and you've got maybe reality. So what's going on in the war, for instance, say it's World War II, World War I, and your concept of what's going on in Germany, what's going on with Hitler, whoever it is. So you've got these two things. And in there, you've got a lot of nuance in between. But what the people see, which I guess I put that one up over here, I can't recall, but regardless, what they see and perceive becomes what we call the pseudo environment. So what people tell them, i.e. media, et cetera, tells them about the environment, then becomes their reality. And so it's basically the place that's in between the two, that pseudo environment, which can be influenced heavily. And when you do that, he was the original one who came up with the idea, supposedly, of stereotypes. So basically, you get that mental image. So as soon as you hear Germany, as soon as you hear Hitler, whatever it is that's been imprinted in your head, that becomes the thing. And that is kind of what you act upon. And so when you imprint people, one way or another, or it's just natural, with those stereotypes, then they tend to fall into those like very concrete mob mentality type of thought processes. And he just kind of defined that space in between and how that can be influenced in that pseudo environment, as he called it.
It does. I mean, it does just get to higher and like higher level, like mastery of society. I mean, it's pure evil, but like you can't help but like admire the thoroughness of the people trying or successfully controlling society. There's obviously there's always factions. Whoever, runs the world isn't a monolith. It's always evolving. But it's not just control of like economics and academics and science R&D and military and finance. I mean, there is control of like how you think. Like I would love to know. We'll never know. But I would love to know how. I mean, you have, studying like war history, right? Generals are you're learning about different tactics and then how new weapons can change like the battlefield, and sometimes you have to throw old tactics out the windows. I mean, like in the event of an EMP and no satellite GPS, like you have to throw out your bleeding edge game plans and kind of revert to your what do we do? How do we train when we don't have any technology? There are all these different, I guess, modes at which you go into the attack space. You got to imagine that whether it's a top-down control, kind of deep state, Illuminati, whatever, or if it's just factions of, nation states going at each other, right? Us versus the communists or whatever, Pakistan versus India. You got to imagine that they are incorporating things like Gustave Le Bon's book into the shaping of media narratives. Like it's not as simple as a political ad where you make the other guy look bad. And this advertisement was paid for by Tommy Carrigan. Dr. Aaron Williams, he's soft on crime. You're just kind of your normal mudslinging. You got to imagine that there's some real thought going behind like algorithm tampering and like what you see on your screen. And you won't even know it's happening if you haven't become well versed in like crowd psychology. Like you almost have to admire how evil and cunning they are. But that's the first thing I thought is like when I finished that book was I just had this mental imagery of like someone at DARPA taking the book and like just, feeding it into a supercomputer and then just being like, now control the internet. I know it's not that simple, but I also don't think it's probably like that far removed. Like, right? That's what you would do. Like I've always said, I'm friends with Dale Comstock. He was the youngest ever member of Delta Force, tier 1 operator. I mean, did personal security for George H.W. Bush and George. I mean, just he is GI Joe. And I'm like, man, what you would do is you'd want to scan Dale's brain, and then when you make 1,000 robots, you would just want them to all be Dale. Like, if you wanted to control the world, like, you would get into these group psychology things and then just have a computer act on. I don't really know where I'm going with this. Bail me out, Aaron.
No, I agree with you. If you think of it in terms of like something that's tangible, as you're saying, I think that's a really great point that you just brought to mind for me. I haven't thought of it in this way, but when you think about whether it's computers and the digital age that was pretty well non-existent, 150 years ago, it wasn't existent at all, and a little over 100 years ago, really wasn't existent. But whenever you think about the development that we've had in that, so there was obviously reasons that we did it for the betterment of humanity, some people to try to manipulate certain parts of it, all these different things. This has all been happening on just an incredibly rapid scale. When you also talk about the weaponry of war, for instance, this has also gone up a lot. We always had some weapons for thousands of years, but now it's a totally different level. And my son and I were just pulled up some show about these new weapons that the military has, and how they like shoot down these drones, and how the frequency jammers will jam the drones, so then no more signal can be sent. So either it'll have to return to base or it'll just drop.
Oh yeah.
All these different things. Along with more like other firepower, stealth cloaking of, changing heat signatures to make a tank look like a car, for instance. All
make
these
a
cool
tank
things.
look like a Civic.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it developed over time. And if you think about that, you take that whole concept of what's happened over the last 100 years or so, and you think about psychological warfare being actual weapons that were tangible. They've been working on these said psychological warfare weapons for about 150 years.
Yeah.
It is very evident from reading through different parts of history, from reading a book like that, that's what they've been doing. So when it comes to like, hey, I'm going to hand this weapon over to you, and we're going to use this here with our group because we're going to try to control this part of a country or this part of an industry or whatever. It doesn't even have to necessarily be bad. But there's very clear evidence that these weapons of psychological warfare have been developed from the ground up and extensively developed, and have become very, very powerful and pervasive.
And then you got to imagine that, because I remember watching this documentary from like the 90s about, like a B-52. The old bomber coming into land at some airport. He had to land at like some civilian airport in Germany or whatever. And they're kind of telling like the air traffic control, like, we're coming in, and they're like, we don't see you. And they're like, oh, sorry. And they like flipped off like whatever jammer they were using. They're like, yeah, we only see a Cessna. And then they're like, oh yeah, sorry about that. And they flipped it off, and then they saw the B-52, and that's like a B-52 is like this big, slow, lumbering, like, I mean, it was brought into service in like Korea. Like, these are not new planes. Like, and like that was like an old thing that they just kind of like plugged into this old plane in the 90s. So, I mean, they just on December 4th, I think they unveiled the B-21 Raider, the successor to the B-2 Spirit. Looks almost the exact same. It's the stealth bomber. You can't detect it. You look at it, it looks like an alien. It looks like an alien craft. And you can only imagine most of the stuff on the B-2 Spirit is still classified. And that came out in 1989. And then the stealth bomber before that, the F-117 Nighthawk, there are still things being declassified about that even like Air Force fanboys are kind of blown away by. So the point I'm getting at is it's not at all new to understand that, of course, the military is far, far ahead, right? In their technology. And that makes sense when you're thinking about metamaterials or hypersonic weapons or spy satellite resolution. Like, you kind of, there's probably some form of invisibility cloak. There, these things we can probably accept, right? If they've identified psychological warfare as a weapon no less powerful than an A-bomb, you got to imagine that, are they 20 years ahead? And at first it kind of sounds silly. You're like, well, it couldn't be because, there's nothing new about, I guess, psychology. Yeah, but then you find out some shit they had in the 90s about a plane, and you're like, is that possible? And you're like, yeah, it was just a special access program. You got to wonder what kind of supercomputer. I mean, have they fed it every Freud book, every Le Bon book? Have they just, Edward Bernays, have they just pumped it up with just a trillion volts of computing power? It's not even the right measurement, but are they learning like new weapons of deception that we can't even wrap our minds around? Like, we think of just basic ones, right? Gaslighting, straw man arguments, Hegelian dialectics. I mean, is there an equivalent of the stealth bomber, but for like crowd control? I mean, is it down to like not just have all the news anchors say the same things, but have the camera use this level of saturation on color because it affects some primal part of our brain, like a ball seeing red? Can you add different colors to things that make us subconsciously accept it that we wouldn't even know, right? We find out in 50 years, like, oh, did you know that the color of Tucker Carlson's desk was actually a DARPA program or some shit? Like, we don't even know. You got to wonder, is there some like classified psychology? I don't know.
It's a great question. I think that a lot of it, there is probably some that's classified, but apparently it's pretty well known. And I can't recall how many agencies how many divisions there are, but within the military, there are many psychological operations divisions. And with anything that they use, they're not just doing it on a whim. They're doing it because it's had some element of effectiveness, if not a very large amount of effectiveness. And so whether it's interfering with other countries' elections, for instance, by socially engineering their social apps or whatever I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to say, that sort of thing, whether it's dropping pamphlets and doing things like that in terms of propaganda spreading, that sort of stuff, that also has been going on for a long time. I mean, that's been going on for well over 1,000, 2,000 years, even during wartime. So they know that the power of the human mind is a lot more powerful than a lot of the other things. And if you can take someone else's weaponry and you can flip it to your side, and they've already done all the work to build it, then that's like a double sort of win. And I don't know if you ever played any of those old games with what was it, Age of Empires or something, and you could either try to destroy them. I had to delete them from my computer because I couldn't stop playing them. I'm like, oh, after I take over this territory or establish this, then I'd be in there for like 12 hours. I'm like, okay, I have to do something else. Deleted it from the old school computer. Let's move on. But in there, one of the coolest things was you could have all these different ships and you're going through the different ages, as you civilization, Well, if you had priests and you could then convert ships, you could convert the enemy's anything, basically catapults, any of the things that they were using, you could convert them. And all of a sudden now you've really kind of turned the tide of a war. So you throw out an army of these priests and then basically all of them are yours. That is kind of like what psychological warfare is to some degree, that they know that they can really do that. I mean, those units exist for a reason. The things that they do, and they're so multi-level. The things that you just mentioned are outside of probably 99% of Americans' purview, if I was guessing. Gaslighting. What's gaslighting mean? Like, we just kind of take things for granted, and we're taught, bell rings, do as you're told. Books are correct. Why would you ever question them? Those are the experts. Move along. CDC said, right? So you get the whole thing. But yeah, they've known this for a long time. And that's why, like, Gustave Le Bon's writing a book about it in 1895. And I'm sure he probably wasn't the first one, but I haven't heard of a lot of great forerunners. But I think they knew back then that, hey, if we can get to people's minds, and then as those means of communication then were faster, more pervasive through society, then it's, whoa, okay, hold on, we've really got something we can work with here. And so whether that's just advertising, like, hey, we want to get our product done, it's a great product, it's going to help people, or it's something else, they figured out those ways to do it. And you can pretty well clip it through. And so whether you're talking about those news anchors, And apparently, and I haven't looked into this a lot, but I've heard it from actually some people that have worked in psyop stuff within the military. They even set like certain frequencies for the different news broadcasts. So, what's going on inaudibly and audibly gets your mind into a different state.
Yeah.
And so it is that pervasive. Not all of it's secret, though. A lot of it you can kind of find, but there's a whole multi-level bunch of it. So it doesn't have to be just one super weapon. It is kind of the combination of using all of them and being able to also change, say, your strategy as you go along. As you were kind of mentioning, that's what you have to do in any sort of war, using weaponry, strategy, game, whatever. You have to do that. And so you have all those tools and then you vary it along the way.
I've always wondered, like, not even in like the kind of the idea of like the subliminal message where you know, flash a frame and it says kill the president. Like, it kind of seems like old school sci-fi. But yeah, I've always wondered, like why wouldn't you, my phone, I have it set, it's one of those things, and it's been set this way for you. It's not even new. Where it's like after 7 p.m. it starts to like dim the white pixels and kind of make it a little easier on the eyes, a little softer on the eyes. And in the morning, that's why you want like bright lights, is to sort of wake up. And that's just like that's a simple thing. That's just kind of playing with your own circadian rhythm. Circadian. But like, yeah, you gotta wonder like what else is going on where it's regardless of like what the anchor is saying. I mean, we know little things just like food, right? I mean, that's why they all use red, because red's supposed to like simulate or stimulate hunger. How many things are going on all around it? Yeah, frequencies, inaudible noises, and then of course there's the facial expressions. And then there's just sort of the appeal to authority, right? It's the fatherly figure wearing a suit. Tonight at 7, we talk about, it's why you start to see more and more, like what I really started to notice more and more during COVID was as you realize they were lying, and then why was it such a shock? And it's because it's, the FDA, the CDC, they come out and they're on the podium and there's the columns around them with the American flag and the Marines. And we are telling you and there's so much pomp and circumstance. And if that's just one thing that makes it seem presidential, then what other things are being framed on TV? What other things are being framed through how you see it on social media? And then, we've talked about just when you're alone and you're on your own phone in your apartment and you look at a tweet and it says it's been retweeted 1.5 million times, you don't know you just assume 1.5, you're like, oh, that's 15 football stadiums. But you don't, what is it really? It's pixels on the screen and it says 1.5 M. That's 1.5. That's not looking out your window. And if you see 1.5 million people in the streets, that's 1.5. There's some like primitive, like, oh, Jesus, they are coming to burn the city down, right? But you see it on your phone. You just look on YouTube, and we've all done it. You see a video that you normally wouldn't click on, but it says 200 M, 200 million views. You're like, oh, well, what is this? You got to see what it's about. You don't know that that's really the number. How do you not know that? And then vice versa. You see someone say something that you're like, I do agree with that. Fuck this thing or fuck this system. How do you not know it's being artificially reduced to say it has 4 likes? How do you not know that that doesn't have 4 million? And yeah, if it's this effective, if psyops are this effective, and we know that the US military machine skimps on nothing, why wouldn't they? And there are some things we can see, right? We can see the aircraft carriers. You can see the fighter jets around. You see the motorcade with the president. Those are things you can't hide. Some things are a little more classified, but you can still watch nuclear missile silos, whatever. And then every once in a while, you see the effect of their power, right? Going and getting bin Laden in the middle of the night using a stealth helicopter. But if we know all these things exist, then why? And you can't see the psychological, because they're not going to have a big building that says psychological warfare headquarters. And you're like, wow, look at the size of that base. But you've got to imagine that, because not only that, I mean, you talk about zero footprint. Why send Delta Force into another country? You just get in the social media app and affect anything and everything. It's got to be so matured already. It'd probably make your mind spin.
Yeah, I would say scientifically you are correct, and it does make your
As a
mind spin.
doctor, I would say you're accurate, Tommy.
This isn't my particular area of study, but then again, I don't even think in psychiatry it's really that much about
Yeah.
any sort of psychology, let alone mass psychology. In fact, yeah, if I asked psychiatrists if they ever get any formal study in group psychology, I'm going to guess it's little to none.
Yeah.
It's pretty well all individual. And so while we have a lot of people out there diagnosing individuals' mental problems, we don't have a specific, other than the people who just really pay attention. Other than that, so like a Desmet, for instance, other than that, we don't really have a class of people out there diagnosing society. Society's just told us that's just the way it is. That's just the way it goes. It just kind of keeps moving in this direction just because it does. That whole chicken and egg sort of argument, I think, comes back into it. But no, the layers and everything, they're tight and very well done. And you turned me on to something too, Tommy, that I'll pull this back into our conversation here as well. Because you mentioned when we talked about, industry pushing out other industry in the ways in which they do it. Well, the tobacco industry being one, and you mentioned the sugar industry, and I was like, what? I hadn't maybe heard about it. So I've got now at least a few books on it. I've dug into it a good clip. And, they all did very well. Radium was another one back in the day. But they all did very well, and they did a lot of those same tactics. They learned what convinced people and what was able to bring things. So if you go back to Gustave Le Bon's book, you talk about one of the main things that you had to have in order for people in a crowd to believe you was prestige.
Mm-hmm.
He used this theme multiple times in that book. If you had prestige, then people they didn't really want to spend that much time thinking, especially if it was a crowd. So if they're in that crowd mentality, like prestige said it, Trump says it, Obama says it, whoever says it, the CDC says it, that's the way it is. So they utilize that. They said, well, this vehicle exists in human psychology in order to affect it. So let's go take the wheel. And so then they pay off the Harvard docs and whoever to basically say, no, it's fat's in the artery. It must be fat that's going in there. Makes sense, right? Which a lot of things do work like that, that are common sense. That said, if you have other ways in which fat is developed, especially by intaking a whole lot of sugar, and that's converted in your liver into said cholesterol, et cetera, and triglycerides and what have you, then, and I didn't go through all that exactly, so not scientific on that, but generally speaking, those sorts of things can be used then to just gloss over the public. They're like, they want a simple answer. I'm going to give them a simple answer. It's going to have Harvard name stamped on it. And nobody's going to listen to all this one or two doctors who will also smear, go after their credentials, say that, somebody's funding them while we're actually funding people. And we'll blare that across all media and news and get a couple other prominent people who have prestige, who people trust, to say the same thing. Fauci, whoever it is. The same pattern, they figured out what this weapon and vehicle looks like, and they just repeat it. But you're never told anywhere that this stuff exists. So you're assuming the best of humanity. You're assuming, one of those pretenses that we use is that, the just cause, just humanity. I'm forgetting the name of it. Basically, another one of those psychological biases you have. Like, I want to believe the world's just too. In fact, I did, entirely, way too much. And when I'm wanting to look back into some history textbooks, for instance, and especially the newer ones that kids are learning now, is I didn't know what a false flag, I'd never heard of what a false flag was. I was like, is that somebody fake painted a flag and put their own up that wasn't official? Like, what in the world is that? But it has played a really important part in human history, let alone recent human history. but none of that is in there. So if you don't know it's there, you never know to look for it. So if you don't know psychological warfare exists and that it's pervasive and that it's been utilized over and over and over again, and here's the patterns, you never know to look for them. You just go with your personal biases you've been imprinted with. Authority, it's a just world. It really can't be that bad. It can't be that bad as you say. So I'm just going to wash my hands of it and take my shots, for instance. That's where people land. And that's how it works.
And it's, yeah, there's no one there to like, it's not a class where you go and you start to understand calculus or organic chemistry, and the professor who understands it is like, correct, you're now understanding it, and you get the good grade, and you get a confirmation that you're figuring it out, right? Or you get better at a sport and you start scoring higher, and you can see the points on the scoreboard, and you're like, I am a better player. There's no one to like, there's no one to confirm it because you're not taught it, right? Just like you're not taught about the 1933 business plot in the United States for like the DuPonts and the Remingtons wanted to pay off a former, kind of like the General Mattis of his day, General Smedley Butler, 30 years prior to Eisenhower. They wanted to pay him like 10 million bucks in 1933 dollars to go take a bunch of disgruntled World War I veterans and overthrow the White House and remove FDR. And like that's not, and this is the most decorated Marine of all. The only I think he had 2 medals of honor while still alive. Like General Smedley Butler, he wrote the book War is a Racket, and he was either all these. There's called the Bonus Army. It was a bunch of veterans from World War I who were promised right bonuses. I can send you the book, and
Yeah, I'll look it up.
it was 1933 and they still hadn't been paid. So it'd been like 14 years since the end of the war, and they were all angry. And so they were out on like the mall in Washington, D.C. And they were out there and giving speeches and stuff. And Smedley Butler was like, he was like the soldier's soldier. He was one of them. He had risen through the ranks. He wasn't some elitist. He had risen through the ranks from like an enlistee to like the highest level. And they wanted their money. And then he was approached by these guys that at first, Smedley Butler was such a badass. He sniffed him out right away. These guys approached him, these like 2 wealthy guys who were both Marines. So they kind of had an in with Smedley because he always had a soft spot for Marines. And these 2 guys that approached him were actual veterans with actual, like, scars from World War I. So he gave him the time of day. But from the get-go, he kind of sniffed him out. He said like from the first meeting, he knew something was up. And they were like, what we want to do is, we really want these soldiers to go get their bonus. And like, we represent like wealthy. And right there, Smedley was kind of like, well, no, if you were one of these guys, you'd be out there protesting. Instead, they're rolling up in like a private car. They had taken like a private train down to see him, which just, that's like flying in on a private jet. If you do that in 1933, that's big dick money. And Smedley, being a badass, just went along with it and was like, tell me more. And they eventually were like, yeah, we want to do this, and this might result in us, removing FDR from the presidency. What they actually wanted was, it was a consortium with the wealthiest people in America. They wanted to remove FDR or make him a figurehead and make Smedley the king of America. And they would run a kind of a fascist junta from DC and control the United States. And they wanted to return the dollar to gold-backed currency, which I don't even kind of really disagree with, which is kind of a bad part. You're like, oh, are they that evil? But they wanted to overthrow a duly elected president, so I guess that's no good. And Smedley sniffed him out, figured it all out, and was kind of basically like, go fuck yourself. I'm an American. Went and testified before the Senate on un-American activities. And they were like, yeah, it seems like it's a probable conspiracy theory. And then just nothing happened. And Smedley was like, what the fuck? Just like, I think he just had enough and went like retired to the countryside. But like in 1933, it's called the business plot. The wealthiest people in America want to overthrow the president, make a military leader the king, and turn America into a fascist military junta. And then 30 years later, Eisenhower, who's really Smedley Butler 2.0, kind of gives the same speech. He's like, hey, there's an unelected machine in the darkness. And then, as if the first 2 weren't enough, a third guy comes along named JFK, And he's like, yeah, we're not going to do this never ending war escalation. And they blow his head off. So, like, you don't learn about the most intense American history I had never heard of. I think I heard about it through Joe Rogan in like 2010. And I was like, this is bullshit. No, this can't be true. But there it is. That would be like if General Mattis, former Secretary of Defense under Trump, got on whatever, like Instagram Live and was like, I've been approached by Elon Musk, Jeffrey Bezos, Bill Gates, and George Soros, and they offered me $1 trillion to overthrow the president. And we were all like, huh, all right. But like that happened. And we're not ever taught about it. And so the point of me saying all this is like, it's hard to wake up to it when there's no one to confirm it. There's no one to say, oh, correct, you've passed the test. You've understood about the business plot. We are under these like mass spells that you can never know you've gotten out of because no one else even knows they're in them. I don't know if this whole rant has made any sense or if I've kind of put into words what I was thinking.
No, makes perfect sense.
I don't
No,
know.
you're absolutely right. I mean, you can't diagnose a problem unless you know you've got one. You stand around wandering and confused and nothing ever makes sense, but you have no idea about what to look for first. So you don't know what direction to look. Even if you had some inkling, you hardly know where to find any information, because as soon as you go to all the information that you've been told to go to Google, go to this, that, the other, go to DuckDuckGo. It has the same search results, by the way. Pretty well the same. Like the suggestions pop up the same. That, Brave, it's pretty well all the same. So, again, psychological warfare, they've kind of figured this out. Like people are going to look for an alternative when they realize whatever. So we'll have the alternative waiting. We'll fund both sides of each war, and then we always win. We'll fund, we'll have two candidates that we both have, that owe us, both of them will say, going into a presidential election, for instance. When they've been thinking about it for 150 years or more, they've been able to figure this out. But if you don't know there's a game, you don't know how to play it. You don't know you're being played. And it's a really uncomfortable thought to think that there's a very large game going on around you all the time, from the time you were born until the present day when you just flipped on the TV, and that there's a good amount, not all, there's always got to be truth in any scam, like for it to work well. There's always truth, but pervasively, scams are in pretty well every element of our society. Without thinking too hard on it, whether you're talking about, money, whether you're talking about government, whether you're talking about social media, it doesn't really matter what you're talking about, science, medicine, it doesn't matter what it is, sports, there's gamesmanship in all of it. So no, I get exactly what you're saying. And it is hard it's such an uncomfortable thought, especially when you're patted on the back all the time. Look, you got a good grade in school. Look, you got A's, you got A's, you got A's. Oh, they're the smart ones. So you give prestige now, also largely, not that people aren't smart who get good grades. There's, but there's a difference between getting a good grade in a government/compulsory, we might call it, school, versus actually having intelligence to be able to figure things out and have that critical thinking skills that you're referring to. Because I can't say I had that much. I just kind of had that doesn't make much sense to me, but I had no time to follow up on anything, right? So it didn't really matter, though I had some vague thought that, well, this looks really strange. That doesn't seem logical, but everybody believes it. Okay, I guess I'll just not raise a stink, because what would I do with it? I have no idea. I didn't know where to look. I didn't know that such thing as a false flag existed. Like if all of humanity knew about, say, false flags, for instance, before one comes up. And so whether or not 9/11 was or wasn't, a coordinated attack. If you had all of the public schools had taught people about the history of false flags, how many people would have went and tried to dive into that and figure that out?
Yeah.
More than what did, right? There would have been many, many, many. There would have been so many calls but that's the power of that psychology across a mass amount of people. You have plenty of people, then whether truthers or whatever you want to call it, that were going on that I wasn't paying attention to at the time, but even still to this day. So there's a fair number. But when you talk about like 2% or 4% or something versus 60%, there's a whole different outcome and what kind of an investigation you put forth. What things you allow to come across the news that say, oh, well, really, it was just like this, and $3 trillion missing the day before, or that was just coincidence, and yada, yada, yada. And you just move on.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of difference in what society will let you get away with, depending on the percentage that actually knows to look. There is something to look for instance.
Yeah. And then it's like, do you even want to pursue this stuff? Like, I think ultimately, like ultimately, like you have to. There's like a deeply like moral, ethical kind of pursuit of the truth. And you're like, I can't, that's the thing, is you can't willingly go back to sleep. Like you can kind of doze off again, but like you can't go back to sleep. So I guess you don't really have a choice once you start, and I hate the term, but for lack of a better one, once you start to wake up, you can't go back to sleep. And like, I mean this like half satirically and half not, but like, is there even like a value to waking up? Like, what good does, I mean, like, I think about like what I'm doing now, and like, on top of just trying to like produce good content and have good guests, like, if all of this is true, like, what in God's name am I going up against? Like, just to try to turn this into a, a profitable business, just enough to like pay for my rent. Like, could I have chosen a more vertical cliff face to try to climb than like go up against big tech DARPA algorithms, like, and discuss things with you and Dr. Malone, and like, what am I, could I have chosen a more difficult path? I don't think I could have. It's dawning on
Well,
me more and more, like,
well,
am I even fully aware of what I'm up against?
no, I think that point stands, but it also is taken by the fact that so much of it is in the mind. So when you're transmitting what you're transmitting to people and all the messages that you and your guests and everybody are getting out there, it makes a huge dent, because ultimately this really isn't, at the end of the day, it's not as much about the algorithm. It's not as much about what kind of weapons of warfare we have. It's more about the minds of the people. What are they going to allow? What are they going to support? You have your Reichstag fire, which was or wasn't set by the Nazis themselves, and that sort of stuff. And now all of a sudden the public is now eager to go invade Poland because they're coming after us, right? That mentality and the mindset. So it's not, you're not going up against a tank. You are going up against tech, in many ways. That said, not every platform has been totally yanked, which is why you're able to put out your content on different platforms and do great with it. And a lot of other people are. So no, I think that it is more than worth it, in fact, because, if you were to be spending your time actually developing a physical weapon, some sort of physical weapon, I've never really dreamed this up, so I won't say what. I'll just say, that's what you want to do, and you want to, I don't know, put together a bunch of these weapons and then go after whoever you imagine to be perceived to be the people doing bad things.
Sure.
Well, you're gonna get washed out. If nothing else, the first time somebody hears about it and they locked you up, then they're gonna say, oh, that person was a danger to our society and to my mentality. They should be punished, put away, put down, put to sleep, whatever it is that the punishment is to do to you, right? And it's all based upon the mind of what people perceive of what you're doing. Whereas when you're doing something peacefully and you're actually working on the root of the problem, which is the mind, you're going to get a whole lot farther. So you can't let it ever be. And obviously you're still going on. Is this episode 1000 and how many now?
This is 1,030.
There you go. 1,030, and you're still trucking through a lot of things that are disconcerting, through things that are sometimes, frankly, kind of frightening and scary in some ways, but you're still trucking along. And so, no, I think it is a big wall, but you're a tough, courageous guy, and that's why you're here. And that's why one of the many reasons I appreciate you, Tommy.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I was kind of having that realization like 2 nights ago. I was literally just laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, just going, "What the fuck am I doing? Like, what in God's name am I?" Like before the last month or so, I thought I was just going up against a very biased big tech, and now I know I'm going up against big tech being used as a puppet by the literal national security apparatus of the United States. And there is just sort of like, I mean, I know it's the right thing to do, and because of that, like I have to keep going for it. Plus, I just like it. I like talking to people. But it's almost like laughable. You just it's like it's not even that you're like facing down a dragon. It's like you're exhausted because you just climbed to the top of a mountain and then there's a dragon and the dragon's wearing armor. And you just at some point you just kind of start laughing. You're like, what am I doing? Like what am I mean, like Rogan barely got out of their like crosshairs. Like they're going full bore on Elon Musk. I'm like, am I just delusional thinking that like I'm gonna win? Is it I don't know, maybe I'm throwing myself a pity party.
No, I don't think you're delusional at all. And I think individually, when we, and it's not that you individually think you're just the only and sole one, but when we think about it from an individual perspective, it definitely, you're less likely to have success in a way that, the more you get out there, the more they are to attack you and potentially cancel you in the minds of the people. Like, so even if they don't cancel you off a platform, can they cancel you in the minds of the people, which is the most important. But when you get up there to the top of that summit and you're seeing that dragon and all the armor, but then when you kind of realize that there's an underbelly there and that the whole dragon's made of paper mache,
Yeah.
you realize one flaming arrow to the right spot, and then or you get everybody who's down on the second level below the summit to shoot some fire arrows up the belly, and then it's all done. And what looked terrifying and menacing, and he owns this mountain and kills everyone up here, well, usually does when it's one-on-one. But when you get past that, just to play off your analogy for a bit, that's what it ends up being, really. When you understand, I mean, it's almost like coming up with diagnosis. I have far from all the answers by any stretch, but getting a little more clear picture as time goes on. But it's almost like, whether you're a mechanic, you have to understand how the car works in order to diagnose what's wrong with it and then to fix it and or make improvements on it. And the human body and being a physician, it's the same way. You just have to understand it. And sometimes that process is painstaking and laborious, depending on what it is, what area of study it is. It's a lot harder when it's this nebulous thing you're talking about learning about, whether it's psychological warfare or historical things and things that aren't in front of you, things that don't engage the hands and take a lot more energy to actually process and go through and learn. But when you go through that process, that's where then you can figure out, okay, well, here's how I'm not tricked next time. Yeah. Here's how I work my way around. Oh, my baseline assumption is that I live paycheck to paycheck. And if I don't do that and compete with everybody and nobody will think, oh, wait a minute, that's all just sham. None of that matters. I should actually do what they didn't teach us to in school. We should all have a 3 or 6 month emergency fund in case something happens that you can't predict emergencies. So hence by their very nature, then you start to be able to take control back of your life because you're not constantly just like led around all day and every day. And this is myself included. I'm not throwing any stones from my glass house. And every time like you tell me something new or somebody else tells me something new, I look into and go, that looks pretty solid, at least most of it, even if they threw a little bit of, crazy over here with it to paint over a whole movement or whatever it is, disinformation, blah, blah. But regardless, every single thing you learn makes you feel a little bit better about not having to play the same game that you've been playing your whole life. So it's worthwhile work. It is painful. It's painful going through medical school.
Yeah.
It's painful doing a lot of different careers, trades, degrees, whatever it is, manual labor jobs. I've done those too. Best. They're painful, but you get good things accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know it's the right thing to do. I think it's just intimidating. Not to woe is me.
It's
But
okay. Anesthesia was very intimidating until I learned what to do, what not to do, and what
yeah,
happens when you do everything right and something goes wrong anyway, how to figure it out, and then how to go about it. It's all just the exact same thing, but just in a different context. And the next book, if you look at, I don't know if you've ever got a chance to read the propaganda book by Edward
no,
Bernays.
I need to.
That's another fantastic follow-up book. The public opinion book, I've only gotten through a little bit of it. It's dense. And it's like you have to sit and think hard about each and everything. The language is very, very stout. Like I'm sitting here going, okay, hold on, what is this word? Occasionally, I'll even find one I don't know, but just trying to put together all of the thoughts amongst a litany of words that we don't use that commonly anymore is pretty intimidating as well. But with propaganda, for instance, and crystallizing public opinion, which you can also do on audiobook, both of those are pretty easy reads. And as soon as you realize it, you're just like, oh, that's interesting. So wait a minute, we took everything. So wait, Walter Lippmann, did you say Walter Lippmann, the same guy who was the head of the CPI, the Committee of Public Information, for getting us into World War I, like after Wilson had gotten reelected based on being the peace president? And then immediately they turned it around and wanted to generate public support for said World War I. How do you get all of America's, parents to send their sons off to war in a foreign land when we've been heavily isolationist for some time? Like, let them deal with their own wars. We don't want wars. We've been through that. We want peace and prosperity. We don't want all these other crazy things going on. Let them handle it themselves. We'll deal with it. It comes to our shores. Well, you had to do a lot. So hence the Committee on Public Information, which was basically propaganda. And who else worked with them? None other than Edward Bernays. So when they figured all this stuff out, and they figured out the posters and the drives, and we get Charlie Chaplin to come to New York City and to do a big drive and a big fundraising presser to get people to donate, to buy war bonds for the war effort. And they did indeed have kind of a Hitler back then. If you look at the old war propaganda posters back then, they had the Kaiser as some big ape, and maybe he had horns sometimes, and he was grabbing like America or some representation of America or whatever it was, or some woman, and carrying her off and doing all these things. And it was all like fear, 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 guilt. Are you not going to take care of the women and children in Europe? They're going to come here and be it. All of it. So they figured that out back then. And that was built off of these things like Le Bon had been doing, but now they had the means of mass communication more readily available. I mean, back in the day before the radio and all that stuff, this is pre-World War I, then it was basically people read the paper like twice a day. Like they'd sit down and read the paper like all the time. Like that was a regular thing. People were getting information, learning information, and we were a well-educated society, which is why through the 1800s, we really did good with keeping a relatively limited government. We really did good not letting the Constitution be morphed into this 3-letter figurehead bureaucracy monster thing that we have now, on elected officials making de facto laws, essentially, right? So violations that are punishable by, whatever, as crimes. We did a good job because people were really well informed. But as soon as they realize we've got these tools, we can kind of get everybody to support our war effort. And then they'll buy the war bonds and refill the war chests. And now we've got, we can have whatever the banking, I don't know much the banking interest, they had some play. But that's how they did it. And then they worked with, in fact, they, before World War I haven't sourced it out fully, but it was sourced. They went to, I think it was JP Morgan and Company, went to they went to about 12 or so different newspaper people in say 1915 circa. And they went there and they found them and they said, okay, what do we need to do in order to be able to really influence public opinion? How many of the newspapers do we need to be able to work with to make sure that our messages come across and we really get the things we need to get done to help the world? And they said it's about 25. So they worked with those 25 different newspapers, and all of a sudden, you've got essentially the precursor to Mockingbird, Project Mockingbird, Mockingbird Media. And they had that back then. So, and this is, supposedly well documented, and I think it's probably not that hard to find. There's only so many hours in a day. But yeah, they had it then. And so when you see it and you're like, oh, okay. And so then it was easy. The rest of it from there was pretty easy for them. They're like, humans work like this. Now we can inundate them with facts all day. And let's get ever the more crafty when we do it. And yeah, it's actually kind of fun. It's kind of interesting. It's quite clever. But when you've been practicing anything so long, of course you're going to get good at it. You're just going to get good if you've been driving to try to figure out something for decades, right? It doesn't matter whether you're talking about, new forms of batteries or electric vehicles or whatever it is. You're going to get there over a period of decades of persistence. So let alone if you have a lot of financial interests of whatever industry, backing you, then you've got a lot more ability. You can go fund your studies, from well-meaning people, and then you can kind of roll along. But, again, the bad parts of it are a house of cards, because most of the people that are involved in any of this, they don't know. So you're just isolated. You're the person making the little part for some secret project you don't know about, and it's going over there and you're helping the war effort, for instance, So it's all there. There's no doubt about it, but it's fun rolling through history. You have to take that same sort of mindset that we've talked about outside of the broadcast too, just kind of put that all in a box. And you're like, wow, okay, there's a lot going on over here. And today it's a bit daunting, but I can take a deep breath and, I kind of continue to roll on, as you were telling me, that kind of thing.
God, it's daunting. Especially when the more you look into it and you keep thinking you're getting closer to the genesis, and then you realize, well, no, then this happened 20 years before that, and you're like, oh, all right, so you go learn about that. And it's like, and then this happened 20 years before, and you're like, oh God, it is. I used to think it had all started around the time Kennedy was whacked, and then I'm realizing no, double that amount of time, easy. And it's just, yeah, it's daunting.
In some ways it's good, because if they were able to come up with, let's say whatever it is, if they were able to come up with that within a period of weeks and pull that over on everybody, gosh, if they had a few years to plan. So let's say this whole COVID thing, right? Oh gosh, what are they going to come at us with next when we're not ready? When you realize that just our baseline assumptions are off, and when you figure out those baseline assumptions, the real ones that we should have had, then all of a sudden things fall into place. And it becomes a lot easier to handle. I don't recall seeing much propaganda before. I mean, they had some, but there were usually papers going against each other. So say leading up to the Civil War, they were really going after the Republicans or the Whig Party or the Democrats, going after them real hard. But you had opposing viewpoints kind of using the same sort of just general attacks. Like if you're in the debate club, you just kind of subconsciously figure those out. But until you started to get a consolidation, that's, I think, where then you can kind of push that eventually happened. But again, it's not that hard to reverse once people are aware that it's out there. When people find out, for instance, say like you said about the 1933, the business plot, for instance, or you realize that, oh yeah, there was actually a group that was planning to take over DC in 1861, prior to Lincoln rolling onto the scene, or as he rolled onto the scene, either assassination and or whatever. Oh, okay. So wait a minute, I do need to look past my history book. I do need to look past that baseline assumption I had that, oh, these are all just I know everything there is to know about history, anything important anyway, anything worth knowing. And as soon as that happens, you open up a whole different world of possibilities for people. And so each and every one of these things you bring up on your podcasts that you enlighten me with or your audience with, it takes you a lot further into a place because the vast majority of people out there are good and trying to do good things. They really are. Really, really, really are. And you look through history and you're like, oh, and these people stood up to it, but then nobody believed that they got whacked because of whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, hell, the CIA, to go back to your reference, the CIA had problems with them not, like, was 60% or so of the American public believed that they were somehow involved and that it was not a lone shooter. Most people didn't buy that back then.
Yeah.
That's why they came out with the whole Countering the Commission of the Warren Report in 1968. Like, how do we kind of get people? And that was basically where we're going to paint people as conspiracy theorists. That whole like idea, and it worked, still works to this day, less and less. But yeah, that's how they came up with it, because it really wasn't working that well. And so they moved it. They've moved that bar a lot more than that 60% now. But we're coming back up. We're coming back up for sure. I mean, the fact that, all the people you have as guest list, I would have never imagined. I would never imagine there was a whole medical underground. I mean, I went to, I get involved with a certain group of physicians, and there's multiple groups that I'm involved with. But whenever I got involved with them, I realized, wow, there's all kinds of other things out here that are possible and that we're doing. And I was like blown away. Fully blown away. I was like, there's other treatments for treating some of these diseases that I don't know about, and that physicians everywhere across the country are doing, and that you can access, and that are working better, or at least as a really amazing adjunct to quote unquote conventional medicine. It kind of blew my mind. It still throws me off a bit, but whenever somebody says, oh, well, we had this cancer diagnosis today, I'm looking through, finding information. I've got books sitting on my bookshelf regarding other ways, adjuncts and things to use for cancer now. So, and some stories that were resoundingly successful, far better than you ever usually hear in conventional medicine. Those would be the quote unquote miracles. And some of these people don't tell their conventional docs because they know that they would freak out on them if they heard they were doing something alternative aside from their plan of surgery and chemo and radiation. So then the docs walk away thinking it was just this random miracle, but really they were doing alternatives with it. Many stories like that. So there's so many good things, but you can't fix a problem until you know what it is.
Yeah.
We're all getting there. I mean, you threw me off with the sugar thing. I was like, what? And then I was reading about how they used the doc for Lyndon Johnson, I think it was, to basically go out and make a huge statement. I think after I think it was that president, but it was one of the presidents, came out and basically said he was just well respected. And he was like the White House physician. Maybe he was a surgeon general also. And he rolls out and he says, we're going to have a war on fats that have caused this heart attack for the president. And the American public needs to.
It's just
so, yeah.
It's so rotten to the core. It is.
But it's a pretty pattern, man.
Yeah.
But is
no, and there's no other alternative. Like, once you become aware of it, like, you have to keep going. You have to keep digging.
You know what? We got people back on Twitter. We've got, at least for now,
Dr. McCullough are back on. I'm still banned, but
well, hopefully you'll be soon to be back on there. And I never really put anything on there. I got banned, and I don't think I'd ever even made a comment. I just had an account to look around. But apparently I followed the wrong people.
Oh, God.
So I got pulled out in the big purge as well in 21. But there's good things happening. The uptake on the bivalence is like 12%, something like that. You got more and more people going, hey, you know what? This doesn't seem to be as good as what it was billed. Like, we're having a whole different conversation now than we were before. And it's really, really doesn't make sense now, let alone 95% effective. And if you get your shot, you will not get COVID, right? That was coming through all the airways. These people are waking up. There's tons of people looking for alternative ways to do things, and less people being a part of the herd every day. We're getting there. There's no doubt about it, Tommy. You've helped me grow a lot. The people that I met that it was Dr. McCullough who actually referred me to you back in the day. all these things like propagate upon themselves, and more good is coming out by the day. And so every other doc that finds out about this network of people, adding other therapies, and people are doing better with it, more and more people get to this. The more and more people go out and look, more people find. Just it's a good cycle. We're either cycling one way or the other, but we're cycling in a good way now.
Yeah.
The people are going in the right direction. The institutions, I mean, yeah, I won't go into that one. Some of the institutions are getting better, but it's more really about the people. We don't have to fix the entire structure of government. We don't have to fix the entirety of the American Medical Association. We don't have to fix the entirety of Twitter is a little bit different because you got to have, that's just purely from afar. But most of the things in our society, we don't need to have those all, like get every single politician in that you or somebody else wants on one side or the other to make things better. All illusion. You don't need it. You just need people to know, which is what you're in the business of doing, is helping them to know. And every time we all grow a little bit more, we put on a little thicker skin every single time. And then we're ready for the next battle, and we don't have to go through the pain of falling for said next deception. I mean, the fact that I didn't get my shots, like, I'm so grateful for. But I was telling people in the fall of 20, I was like, well, I mean, just because they maybe cut some administrative red tape, they were like, I think the shots are bad. And I was like, well, I mean, if they go through the process and the FDA, I mean, surely can't be that bad. I mean, I think, but luckily enough things happened to where I woke up and said, yeah, I don't trust this even a little bit, because this is way too up. I don't know why. It scares me. It freaking frightens me. I have no idea. And I have no idea why no one will listen to me initially, at least, officials and such only listen to a degree. But I'm thankful and grateful. I mean, and while it's a weird headspace to live in, it's a lot better having clarity, being able to help your family when they call you and they say, Tommy, should I get my bivalent booster? I think I'm going to get it, but I wasn't sure. I know you kind of know a little bit. You'd be like, yeah, I've talked to Dr. McCullough and Dr. Malone and, a bunch of other scientists, and they're saying it's really like this in favor of you not getting it. This is the kind of push.
Yeah. I think I'm just trying to remember that it's a marathon. Just take a little bit at a time. I think over the last couple of days, it's happened before at this podcast. I mean, it's over 3 years old now, but I kind of hit these spots where I'm like, how the hell am I going to keep doing this? I'm like, well, you got into this point by just doing 1 or 2 episodes a day, a couple days in a row, and then taking a day off. Just keep doing, I didn't do 1,000 episodes in a day. And that's what I have to kind of keep reminding myself, is when, I kind of hit these moments of just like rubbing my head, like, what am I doing? Just take a break, take a day off, play some video games, go play Age of Empires, go do whatever, and then get back to it. And yeah, it's not all going to be fixed in a day. I think that's why I just got to remind myself. I think I just hit these moments of exhaustion, like mental burnout, anger that my podcast hasn't succeeded more. But yeah, I don't know. I guess baby steps.
You're not the only one. And I mean, I have to remind myself, right? The lights should have been everywhere a year ago. We'd be out of this mess. Not that there wouldn't be any disease, but we would be out of this overall overarching mess. So whether it's the virus spreading, whether it is the fear that comes along with it, it would be way better. Way better. No matter how you play with numbers, people know that, oh, I'm not really getting sick. I haven't gotten a cold. I haven't gotten whatever. Since, we put these in all over our town and in the restaurants and the grocery stores and the whatever, and schools, that would be way better. And so, while I've compiled 250 or more pages worth of research, I've done thousands of hours worth of work, nothing that I've ever gotten paid a cent for, not one. And I've lost many over, in resigning my position, all these different things, I get that same frustration at times. And I have to just sit and remind myself, okay, you're still a lot farther than you were before, Tommy. You've got, I've done over 1,000 podcasts. I've now been able to interview and have this amazing information I put out to thousands upon, cumulatively hundreds of thousands of people over time. And slowly but surely you reach that point where it blows up more. And that's what I'm kind of working on, waiting on with the light too, and from a lot of different perspectives. I can't tell you how many I've tried, a lot. And I've tried a lot that didn't work. I've tried some that, worked marginally and some that worked pretty well. But then you get to it and I get this close on getting another huge thing and all of a sudden it falls off. Somebody got way too busy with some other aspect of life and now all of a sudden that initiative went down. Oh, you call and you try to say, somebody wants them to put them in this installation somewhere. Then all of a sudden the ability to, at least the knowledge to get to that funding is not there. And, you're trying to get these pieces put together, but you don't control an industry. It gets frustrating too. I share that frustration with you at times. Actually, a lot of times. I probably had a little bit of those feelings today, even. In fact, I did. But I kind of take a deep breath and I go, yep, you're right. Rome wasn't built in a day. The journey of 10,000 miles begins with a single step. And that pretty well everything you see on TV is some great big crowning achievement happened through many days, many hardships. The Wright brothers, they were never even supposed to be the ones that were going to do that. There was some other guy, Langley, John Pierpont Langley. Langley, like if you think of the government type stuff, that was him. Smithsonian, whatever. He got all the press. He was going to be the one to make man-powered flight happen. Didn't happen. The guys who would take along 5 extra sets of parts because they knew they were probably going to crash and burn 4 to 5 times before they hardly left the ground that day, and they did that for years on end. Those are the guys who finally flew. They did it on a shoestring budget. Mm-hmm. They did it with nothing. They didn't have money coming from the government or from Harvard. They didn't have any of that stuff. And eventually, they ended up being the ones that did it because they had the heart. Their heart was in it from the right place. They weren't doing it for publicity. They were doing it to help humanity. So if we can get things and move them like this, we can use the air to deliver things and to transport people. Wow, this would be incredible. And that drove them. And I'm sure they had plenty of shitty days. Like you have, like a lot of people in this truth movement, we'll call it, have. But every day you're getting farther. Every day you're getting better and you're helping me. I mean, the sugar thing helped me a ton in a whole lot of different branch points. When I'm looking at what industry can do, whether it's like what they may or may not do in the future, I know the playbook now. I know it wasn't just tobacco. Well, it's tobacco. No. Sugar, tobacco, radium, go down the list. Now I've seen it because you helped turn me on to that information. That, I mean, there's so much information out there, but every day, you don't even, there's so many things you've turned me on to that have really helped in my understanding of what's going on and also just what I'm trying to accomplish generally. And I think a lot of those building blocks I still haven't fully utilized yet, but I plan to. But they're there, and I'm still feeling it big time from a month ago. I had the sugar stuff up. I've got 2 sugar books right there. I have had multiple, hit piece articles. Who funded them? Oh, here's how the lattice work. But there's a lot of good things happening. It is hard not to get frustrated, but there's nothing. I can't imagine one single solitary thing. There's some like scientific accidents. That said, that was usually through somebody working on something and finding something while they were doing a lot of work on something else. Nothing really amazing has ever happened without plenty of failure, frustration, and a lot of long and persistent hard work. It's always going to be this way. Always. I have to remind myself of that. And I've done it multiple times. then you study the history and you're like, oh, okay, that's how the Wright brothers did it. That's how any of these people finally broke through, becoming presidents, getting to the top of the military and helping to guide the military through some battles. They all did it with their share of failures along the way. Thomas Edison and the light bulb improvement, 10,000 fails. The Dyson vacuum cleaner guy, he had 2,500 roughly failures before he finally got it right. It's always this way. And you keep that in perspective. That's what keeps me going. Because if I just looked at it from the outside world perspective, I'd be like, what the hell am I doing with my life? I resigned from my position. I've taken this position outside of the mainstream so hard that been alienated by most. It would crush me. But I keep that focus on the fact that you're ever trying to do anything special, it's going to be hard. It's going to be frustrating. If it was easy, somebody else would have already done it. And so it's still worthwhile. It's still something that we keep plugging away at every day. And whether it's I do 30 minutes on one aspect I've been neglecting for a while, and I'm just like, every day I got to do 30 minutes on this project, 30 minutes on this one, an hour on this one. That's going to be my new thing. Whatever it is, I just have to get it done. But I know that it has to be this way. It was never going to be any way other than this. And that doesn't mean I'm not going to accomplish what I want to get accomplished with the light, for instance. You could be 1 or 2 days away from 1 million subscribers with just 1 or 2 interviews that come out, and all of a sudden, boom, this happens. And that's the same thing I'm hoping for with the light. And that kind of keeps me moving on.
I appreciate that much needed pep talk. I'll Venmo you for your services, for your free therapy.
I'm not a psychiatrist. I do put people to sleep, verbally, so that you might be able to charge for, but this I probably can't.
I always just kind of go back to, anyone that's ever succeeded, it's always just been through an absolute marathon of just slogging through shit and failure. And then it works. And then as well as like the delusion of, I always tell myself, like, what if I am just like a week away from like my podcast absolutely blowing up? And I've been telling myself that for about 156 weeks now. But maybe it's the 157th. And, I don't like to think that maybe it's the 600th week. But next week I'll tell myself it's the 158th. And then just kind of keep that carrot out in front of me. Right? I mean, eventually I've got to be right, or I'll die.
I mean, think about it this way. I've probably had 74 weeks or more with the light, for instance. So I'm about halfway. I thought the first time I got it out there and it got out to tens of thousands of people, one of the bigger, things I've been able to get out to people, I thought, okay, boom, this is great. This is going to work. Flare up, fizzle out. What? And how many of those close calls and gut punches have I had? In the last month, I've probably had at least 5 or 6. I thought this is going to be the one. And then I have to stop and I'm like, okay, I wouldn't have been speaking at medical conferences, talking to doctors, if these doctors didn't believe in it and didn't hear, and I wasn't able to deliver that message well enough to them, and they weren't open-minded enough to take it. Now I know these people that I never knew before. You had these people on your podcast that probably when you started, like you'd have never dreamed that you might have been able to have on, like you might have hoped to, but you've had so many incredible people on your podcast. It's crazy. Like when I look down your list, I'm like, whoa, wow, these people like from so many walks of life, that's incredible. Like, I wish I had time to like listen to all of them if I wasn't doing all my stuff. But every time I've listened to them, they're always great and super informative and bring a lot of knowledge to people that's desperately needed. I mean, we consider it like a nutrient or whatever. It's almost like water. The Bible talks about my people are, destroyed for their lack of knowledge. And nothing could be further from the truth. So what you're doing and delivering and working at every day, this is what needs to happen, and that's what you're doing. It doesn't have to blow up on day one. If it blew up on day one, well, that would just be really random and probably orchestrated. We'd like somebody to push that and help us orchestrate, but usually it doesn't happen. But eventually we get there.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I just have to keep pushing. There's no
Hang with me.
yeah,
Hang
there's
with me
no,
for 2 seconds.
yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, there's no secret to any of this. It's just gonna be pushing until it finally breaks through. I think I just need to make peace with that.
Say that one more time. I'm sorry about the bad
No,
timing.
you're good. No, there's no like secret equation that I'm gonna come up on of like, oh, if I just do this, it's I imagine it's probably a lot like weightlifting. You never just hit a day where all of a sudden your arms grow an inch in diameter. Like that never what? Like that's silly to even think. Like you build muscle just through the endless slog of years in the gym. And then one day, like you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, I did it. And there's never a day where you figure out the secret to weightlifting. No, you pick things up and you put them down and then you pick them up again. And you do it every day for hours a week, for months, for years. I've been lifting weights for, I don't know, about almost 20 years now, which is just wild to even say out loud. But like, yeah, there's never a moment where you figured out the secret to weightlifting. Oh no, it's lifting until it hurts and then lifting some more and then eating the right food and sleeping. It's really not, it is caveman. Like there's no eureka moment. It's just the long, hard slog. And I think I just need to make peace with that's what this podcast probably is. There might be a eureka moment. There might be a moment it breaks through. It's probably just gonna be like lowbrow caveman brute force pushing the rock up the mountain. And one day I'll realize I'm there. And you don't have to like it, you don't have to dislike it. It's just seems to be the truth. So I might as well keep going. I'm 3 years in, like might as well keep walking. I think that's kind of like the surrender I'm approaching. It's just like whatever.
Yeah, I think you just gotta also just look back and see what you've already done, which is a lot.
Yeah.
The people, the truth you brought out to people, like you really got to turn around. I look around, I'm like, who am I talking to now versus who was I was talking to myself on Facebook. I was doing these different things, and not that I'm anybody special by any stretch, but in terms of what I wanted to try to accomplish, yeah, it hasn't been the big anything per se. There's been some little wins, but I'm definitely closer and closer. More people, you're getting more things going on, and then maybe it's just a small ingenuity. Maybe it's like, on those same platforms, and it's some new idea you come up with, whether it's shorts or whether it's something else, or who knows, but it just all of a sudden, boom, it kind of happens. You take this great quality you have and just a little tweak somewhere, and just delivery or whatever, packaging, who knows what. I don't know that sphere. I'm not good at the stuff like you are, but when that happens, and all of a sudden, then you get those even bigger gains. But if you look back, take stock of where you were before and look at where you are now. That's what I have to focus on. Otherwise, it hurts when I keep wanting to get this in front of me and I can't quite reach it, and I get my hand on it, at least I think I do, and it falls off, or I grab it and it's something different.
Yeah.
It wasn't the win I thought it was going to be. That's what I do. I'm like, take a deep breath. Okay, all right, we're at least this far. We've built this much. We're at a better starting place than we were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever it is. So you've done a lot. You've done a whole lot, and you're going to do a lot more. So
Yeah. I think it really is just like do the episodes, and once you've done them, you can go to bed. I think that's really just like tomorrow you'll take some caffeine and do 2 more. Just keep, one step at a time. All right. Well, Dr. Williams, let's wrap this one up.
Probably.
Text me the Bernays propaganda book, and I'll make sure to send you a Smedley Butler business plot book. That one will melt your brain. Maybe we can get into that next time.
Sounds good.
All right, Aaron. Thank you so much, man. I love you. Thank you for the love today. I needed that. I needed that therapy.
Okay. Love you too, my friend.
I appreciate it, brother. I'll text this to you when it's up. We'll get another one on the books. As always, and guys, you can go check out all Dr. Williams stuff. I'll put all the links in the description to the lights and all that good stuff. Please do text me the propaganda book, because I will read that. Sound
Will
good?
do. And yeah, and I put some new links to the, like, there's a purchase page now. I don't make any money on it. Again, I'll just caveat that again. But one of the companies even came out with a portable light that has about a 7-hour battery life on it.
Ooh,
So you can take it with you.
portable disinfectant light for
Yep.
whatever next pandemic Bill Gates releases. Speaking
Yep.
for myself, not for Aaron.
Eden Park illumination. It'll work for whatever is in there. So,
Beautiful. All
all
right.
right, brother. Have a good night.
Appreciate it, man. I'll send you this episode when it's up. Till next time.